My name is Matt Sinclair. I played 4 years of college football at the University of Illinois from 2001 to 2004. I played 5 years in the National Football League, 2 years in NFL Europe. I think it's misleading. I think that we're brought here to play athletics, and I think in a lot of cases academics is secondary, which is unfortunate. I think it definitely varies on program to program. Considering the first two majors I wanted to do, I couldn't because the prerequisites were only offered during practice hours. I'm inclined to say I was an athlete first. They were very good about academic support. It had nothing to do with that, but I knew what I was here for, so. I was definitely playing the NFL. I knew I would graduate regardless, but I also knew that the opportunity to play in the National Football League is a very small window of time. I knew I could always go back and finish school, which I did. I graduated 2 years after I was finished playing. But I also knew if I didn't commit my all time-wise to football, that opportunity would come and go. Oh, absolutely. But there were risks I knew going into it. But I mean, it's a violent sport. Anybody that thinks they're not going to walk away without any injuries is fooling themselves. I think the NCAA gets off the hook a little bit for medical issues. Fortunately, I have my medical issues, covered from the National Football League. A lot of guys don't. I think they should be compensated in some way by the NC2A. I don't think it should be a program-to-program thing. I mean, it's no surprise the NCAA is a multi-billion-dollar business. You know, a lot's come to the forefront in the last couple of years as far as the prolonged effect of playing the game. I think there does need to be something in place. I don't know the answer to that, but something should be in place because I think the NCAA in particular gets off pretty free and easy. They benefit tremendously from the marketing of players. The players get suspended for signing their own name to a piece of paper. They have a limited amount of time through which to use their image and likeness to be marketable, and they're not allowed to do so. And it's the only industry in the entire country in which a person cannot capitalize on their own image and likeness, and then they aren't able to be, taken care of in the long run. Nowhere else in the country can you tell somebody that they're not able to use their image and likeness to make money. And we tell people that covering a 4-year scholarship is ample enough when in fact that scholarship might not even cover the cost of, groceries or traveling home to a funeral or just doing the general day-to-day college activities that a normal, non-athlete will be able to do in college. That's a fine line when you get into the legal terms of defining an employee, which is why I think it'll never happen, because then you get into workman's comp issues and healthcare insurance issues and stuff like that. But for all intents and purposes, yeah, I think college athletes are like employees. I mean, we sign a paper every semester that says we only do 20 hours of football-related things, and every single person knows that that's a complete farce. Yeah, I mean, easily. And, I made a joke with my college coach one time, what happens if we don't sign this thing here that says we do 20 hours? And he made a joke, oh, well, your scholarships are 1-year renewables. Now, that's since changed. They're 4-year guaranteed now. But that was the mindset, and I think it still is the mindset. This is something we have to sign and say because we want to all play football and have our school taken care of. But we spend 2 to 3 times the amount of our time on football compared to academics and social life and stuff like that. I appreciate why he did it because, he wanted to go to college and wanted to be a doctor, and he obviously, that's not in the cards. Now, there are guys that are able to go through engineering and have gone on to law school, but those are very select few. They're the exception to the rule because of, different circumstances. the thing I appreciate about it is it brought the whole issue to the forefront, which is why we're having this discussion. This discussion wouldn't have been taking place without Kane Coulter and Northwestern doing that. Obviously, with it being a private institution, they were able to do that. Can't happen at a public school. But you saw how quickly the NCAA reacted to that and changed some of the rules as far as we're going to feed you 3 meals now, or things like that. I think it's a start. I don't think unionization is the answer, because I'm a big advocate of keeping the amateur status within the college athletics. Again, I don't have the answer to that, but the narrative has begun, and I think that's a good thing. I think what he's ultimately going for is players to be compensated while they're in college in some sort of way, whether that be a semester stipend, a yearly stipend, something like that. I mean, a lot of people don't even realize that college athletes cannot have a job during the academic year. We're only allowed to work during the 2.5 months of summer, which is technically our only downtime. I think, again, I don't think that we should be considered employees for the sake of amateurism. But I think, again, he started that narrative, which I think is a good thing. And I think that the NCAA is going to have to be reactive. I'd like to think that they'd be proactive with some stuff, but, the NCAA is here for the NCAA. I personally think it's going to lead to the major schools breaking off of the NCAA. There's no way, like you said, for the public schools to follow the Northwesterns, the Stanfords, all those private schools. And then it would become a gross recruiting advantage for those schools. I mean, how can you say, come to Northwestern, we'll pay you, or go to the University of Illinois and you'll get $127 after your rent's paid for every month? So I think what it'll ultimately lead to is the 5, they call them the Power 5 conferences now, coming together and saying, hey, we're going to break off and do our own thing, and we're going to treat the players how they need to be treated, and we're going to have our own playoff system, and all that sort of thing. I don't want to see colleges become like a professional league, because I think the professional, that takes away sort of the ultimate goal that you have, So I think it needs to stay competitive. I think it needs to stay amateur. Again, I don't know the answer to that fully, but I think the discussion's begun a lot because of what Kane Coulter did. Probably ESPN, I would say. I don't do a lot of social media. I have some really good friends that were Northwestern football players that really alerted to me at first, but after they had told me about it, it was can't miss on ESPN. Through the NFL Former Players Association, we get newsletters and emails, and it was included in there. So I mean, you couldn't miss it if you were paying attention to the sports world, because it has become such a big issue. Especially with the whole social justice movement of the last 8 years or so, people being taken advantage of and so on and so forth. So once it was out there, and you couldn't miss it. In the big sports, yes. Now, I know a lot of, track athletes, gymnasts, swimmers, and stuff like that, that wouldn't disagree, but they'd say, oh, it's possible to, get straight A's and do this major and do that major, because they had that opportunity. It's hard to compare the major sports to the other sports. But again, I think that they would say that, a scholarship's probably enough compensation, but again, some of those people might only be on a half scholarship or a partial scholarship, so who are we to complain? But again, it's all relative. I don't think you'd find a lot of people in the big sports that would disagree with me. I know you wouldn't.